Welcome to RealTime Fantasy Sports. This is Starts, Sits, and Sleepers.
Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. On today's show, I'm going to give you my start, sits, and sleepers for the championship games of this weekend. Just 2 games this weekend, 3 games left in the entire season. Crazy how the season's gone by so quickly. But since there's just 2 games this week, I'm not going to give you any sleepers. I'm just going to give you a start and sit at each position and then move on from there. Just not a lot of players to pick from. So hopefully if you're still playing in your playoff leagues, you have some of these players left, or if you want to get in some DFS contest or maybe some pick 'em over under type stuff, you can do that as well. So these are some players to consider for all of that action. So I'm going to start with the quarterbacks. I'm going to start with the starts. There's just 4, obviously, but my favorite start is actually Drake May out of these options. He had a 3-touchdown game last week against a great Texans defense. He's been great all season. He's on the road. It's a tough matchup against the Broncos, but I think the defense could get a little worn out in this game in Denver because of an ineffective offense with Jarrett Stidham starting. I think May's going to do well in this matchup, kind of wear them down, and he has 22-plus fantasy points for 6 games. I think he's going to end up having the best week of any of the fantasy quarterbacks left for these games this weekend. My sit at quarterback, it is Matthew Stafford of the Rams. He had a huge game and a poor showing against the Seahawks this season. So he was good and he was bad. Which performance can you expect this week? That's the big question. I think it could be more on the poor side. He's coming off one of his worst games of the season. Last week scored just 12.9 fantasy points. It would not surprise me at all if he has some struggles on the road in a matchup against a really good Seahawks defense that has allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. I'm a little bit worried about Stafford in this one, especially if you consider how he's played in the postseason. He's missed on some throws that he made throughout the regular season. Just hasn't looked like himself. I know they've won each of their 2 playoff games, obviously, to get to this point, but I still don't totally trust Stafford on the road against this Seahawks defense. Moving on to the running back position, I will go with my start there, and it is actually someone in that same game. It's Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So while I don't love Stafford, I think Williams is going to get a big workload. I think they're going to lean on the run. Williams had a huge game last week, scored 27.7 fantasy points. He has double-digit fantasy points in all but 2 games this year. I know Blake Corum's getting a little more work running the ball, but Williams is still the workhorse back. He gets more of the carries, and he gets a big workload on a weekly basis. I think they're going to lean on him a lot in this game against Seattle. In 2 games against Seattle this year, Williams has run for 161 yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to be a top fantasy back this week in this matchup. My sit at running back, it is Travion Henderson of the Patriots. He's really taken a backseat to Ramondre Stevenson late in the season. He has fewer than double-digit fantasy points 2 straight games and 4 of 5. I think he's just a hard fantasy player to trust right now, especially since he gets so little work in the passing game. This really hurts his floor. He has 3 receptions his last 5 games, Henderson. So that's really low passing numbers, and I just think that really impacts his fantasy value. And I don't like the matchup against Denver. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs during the regular season. I think Henderson's going to struggle here. If I'm picking a Patriots back, it's Ramondre Stevenson. Moving on to the receiver spot, and my start is Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So while I don't love the Broncos in this matchup, I think Jarrett Stidham's going to lean on Sutton here. He had 9 targets last week, and those numbers weren't great, Sutton. They're kind of banged up at receiver with Pat Bryant now, hurt, and I think they're going to be playing from behind. They're going to need to throw often, so I think Sutton's going to get a ton of targets. Remember, he has double-digit targets 4 of his last 6 games. He just needs to connect on a few of those to have some big plays in this matchup. So I think Sutton's going to be a good option for fantasy owners this week. My sit at receiver, it's Davante Adams of the Los Angeles Rams. So he's returned from that hamstring injury. He hasn't been great since that return from the hamstring injury. He had just 2 catches for 24 yards on 6 targets last week. He had just a catch earlier this season against Seattle. It was a touchdown. It was just a 1-yard reception, though. He did not get any other catches in that game. Seahawks have been absolutely unbelievable against the pass lately. They've allowed fewer than 130 passing yards 3 straight games. I think the Rams are going to struggle to throw the ball this week. I don't like Adams a whole lot in this matchup. All right, tight end, my last position to look at. I'll give you a start and a sit. My start is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. He had just a catch for 5 yards on 2 targets last week. It was a disappointing performance for him, but he had been playing really well down the stretch. He had touchdowns 3 of his previous 4 games. He has double-digit fantasy points 5 straight and 7 of 8 before last week. So he's really been a lot more consistent. And Denver struggles to stop the tight end. This has really been an area of concern for them throughout the season. Last week, Dalton Kincaid of the Bills, the tight end for them, 6 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown, led all Bills receivers. I think Henry could be targeted early and often in this game. I like him a lot in this matchup. My sit at tight end is actually a broad one, and it's all 3 tight ends for the Los Angeles Rams. So Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, and Colby Parkinson, they're all splitting work right now. They're all playing, and they're all playing a decent amount, but they are splitting work, and I just don't know which one's going to step up on a weekly basis, so it's hard for me to trust any of them. I would not be surprised if one of them had a decent game, but you tell me who that is. For me, it might be Parkinson because he still is the guy that's getting the most snaps out of those 3 options, but I still find him hard to trust, so I'm just staying away from these options. At this point, just too many options to pick from and too many mouths to feed, so to say, at that tight end position in Los Angeles. So I'm not wanting any of these guys in my lineups this week. All right, those are my starts and sits for the championship games. Let's hope there's some good ones this week and you have a lot of success in your fantasy playoffs. This has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.